I fell in love with my caregiver, and I was going to marry her. But I overheard her conversing on the phone saying, "Girl, don't mind the foolish old man. I'm just enduring him. After the wedding, I'll take all his $730,000 in savings and leave him for good. I swear, 6 more months, and I'll be set for life." When I discovered she was planning to get married to me and steal all my money, I quietly planned my revenge. My name is Aldous Bray, and I am 65 years old. I spent 32 years working as a clocksmith in Caregiver, a quiet coastal town in Oregon where everyone knows their neighbors. This is the story of how I fell in love with my caregiver, how she betrayed my trust, and how I took my revenge. For decades, I shared my modest home with my beloved wife until lung cancer took her from me 5 years ago. We had no kids during our time together, and the silence that followed her death was louder than any sound I had ever known. I was bored, and I was in desperate need of companionship. Then, over a year ago, I hired a caregiver named Talene to help with daily tasks and provide companionship. Talene was 39 when I hired her, and she brought laughter back into my empty house, or so I believed at the time. 6 months into working for me, Talene and I crossed professional boundaries and started dating. I didn't know then that every smile was a lie. Every gentle touch was calculated manipulation. Talene betrayed me in the most calculated and soul-crushing way possible. She played a long game of deception, pretending to love me while secretly planning to steal my life savings and leave me with nothing. Her betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about taking advantage of my grief and loneliness for her own selfish gain. She saw my vulnerability and turned it into her opportunity to get rich without working another day in her life. The morning I overheard her phone conversation changed everything I thought I knew about human nature. I had accidentally left my hearing aid on when she stepped into the sunroom for what she thought was a private call. I overheard her laughing on the phone about my memory lapses, and she described how easy it would be to walk away wealthy. She told the person on the other end of the call that I was just her retirement plan, a project she was enduring for the payout. There was no guilt in her voice when she said these words, but only cold calculation and mocking amusement. Just the night before that devastating phone call, she had kissed my forehead and brought me soup in bed while humming like an angel. She had tucked me in with such tenderness that I felt grateful to have found love again in my golden years. I went to sleep thinking I was blessed to have such a caring woman in my life. 2 weeks before I discovered her true nature, she had encouraged me to update my will. She offered to drive me to the notary herself, claiming it was just in case something happened to me. I agreed gratefully, thinking she cared about my well-being and wanted to help me get my affairs in order. It was later that I realized she had been going through my personal files, memorizing my assets, and even calling my insurance provider while pretending to be my future wife. Every gesture of care was actually a step in her master plan to take control of my life and finances. Every kind word was a lie designed to make me more dependent on her guidance and judgment. But Talene made one critical mistake in her elaborate scheme. When I overheard her phone conversation about how she planned to walk away with my hard-earned assets, worth around $790,000, including my house, that's when I realized I had the upper hand to turn this in my advantage. And I was going to take my sweet revenge. Talene definitely didn't know that the revenge for this betrayal was already set in motion, and she was about to receive a retirement gift she would never forget. Before I go into the details of my revenge, I need to say this. When I heard Talene's voice on that phone call, laughing and mocking me like I was her personal joke, my heart tightened in a way that had nothing to do with my old age. It was like watching a precious family heirloom suddenly shatter in slow motion right before my eyes. For over a year, I had opened every corner of my life to this woman who I thought cared about me. She spoon-fed me when my hands shook from arthritis, listened patiently to my endless stories about my late wife, and even helped me organize old photo albums filled with decades of memories. I let her into my most private thoughts and feelings. I let her into my wounded heart that was still healing from losing the love of my life. I didn't just trust her with my daily care. I loved her deeply and genuinely. Not in the foolish way people might expect from a lonely old man, but with a desperate longing for human connection and companionship. After my wife passed away, loneliness didn't just visit my house. It moved in permanently and made itself comfortable in every room. Talene brought light back into that suffocating darkness and silence. I thought she was a gift sent from heaven to help me through my final years. I never imagined for a single moment that she saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone to financial security. I thought we had built something real together, something that honored the memory of my late wife while giving me hope for whatever time I had left. I sold my entire collection of antique watches to help cover what she claimed were her brother's urgent medical bills. Those watches had been my hobby and passion for decades, each one carefully chosen and lovingly maintained. I added her name to all my emergency contact forms at the bank and doctor's office. I even introduced her to my neighbors as the wonderful woman who had made life worth living again after years of grinding loneliness. Every single gesture of generosity, every dollar I spent on her needs, every vulnerable conversation about my fears and hopes, I handed over freely and gladly. I thought it was all going to someone who genuinely cared about my well-being and happiness. But it was all an elaborate performance designed to separate me from my money and dignity. Realizing that truth gutted me in a way I had never experienced, even when I lost my wife to cancer. I sat in my living room that night, staring at the old clock on the mantel that had been ticking steadily for decades. The sound that used to comfort me now seemed to mock my foolishness. Everything in my world had changed in the span of one overheard phone conversation. She didn't just manipulate and deceive me. She made me feel like the biggest fool who had ever lived. I wasn't just heartbroken by her betrayal. I was completely humiliated by my own blindness. But I didn't cry like a broken old man. I didn't scream or rage against the injustice of what she had done to me. I just sat very still in my chair and started thinking clearly for the first time in months. Because no matter how old and frail I might appear to the outside world, I was not finished fighting for my dignity. Not yet, and maybe not ever. I wasn't always this soft-spoken elderly man sitting quietly in a house full of memories and regrets. Decades ago, I had stood up to a corrupt supplier who tried to bribe his way into contracts with our family clock shop. I reported his illegal activities to the authorities, even though it meant losing our biggest and most profitable account. My father had always taught me that a man's reputation is the only thing he can't buy back once it becomes stained with dishonor. That lesson had stuck with me through every challenge I had faced in life. When Talene betrayed my trust so completely, it wasn't just about the money she was trying to steal from me. It was about the cheap manipulation of watching someone smile directly in your face while secretly digging your grave behind your back. I had already buried one great love of my life with my own hands. I wasn't about to let some calculating stranger bury the last remaining pieces of the self-worth I had left in this world. Then I remembered something my wife had whispered to me during her final days in the hospital, when the cancer had stolen most of her strength but left her wisdom intact. She had looked directly into my eyes and said, "Never let people mistake your kindness for blindness or your age for weakness." Those words echoed in my mind like a steady drumbeat. Those words made me even more determined to get my revenge on Talene, not just because she thought I was a foolish old man, but for every elderly person who's ever been betrayed by someone they trusted completely. From that point on, after I already overheard her phone conversation with God knows who, I began to watch her closely. Suddenly, I could see how evil and manipulative she was. I could see it clearly in her eyes every time she helped me out of my chair or reminded me of appointments I had already remembered perfectly well. There was that smug little glint of satisfaction, like she was watching a master plan unfold exactly as she had designed it. She thought I was soft clay in her manipulative hands, an old man lost in confusion and clinging to her warmth like a drowning person grabs a life preserver. Now, before we proceed, it's very important to say that if you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. By liking, subscribing, and even leaving a short comment of where you are watching from, you are helping me grow this channel so that other people can find this video and learn the graceful wisdom tips that it offers. I share real stories from people who face tough situations just like this. These stories aren't just for entertainment. They're meant to help us learn and grow wiser. We can sometimes become vulnerable, and that's why it's so important to learn from the experiences and mistakes of others. Together we can protect ourselves and protect each other through shared wisdom. Now back to our story. She would smile sweetly at me while speaking, but I could hear the cold calculation hiding behind every carefully chosen word. She started talking louder around me, like my hearing had suddenly failed completely. She would whisper into her phone calls from 2 rooms away, thinking I couldn't follow the conversation or understand what she was planning. She even began mixing up my medications on purpose, then apologizing with a gentle kiss on my cheek when I pointed out her mistakes. I played along with her game perfectly, giving her exactly the performance she expected from a confused old man. I acted genuinely puzzled when she asked me the same question twice in one conversation. I let her lead me slowly by the elbow like I was made of fragile glass that might break at any moment. The truth is, she was putting on a show for herself, trying to convince her own conscience that I deserved what she was planning to do to me. She didn't know that the clocks weren't the only things keeping time in my house. She didn't know I was watching her just as closely as she was watching my bank account and financial records. She thought she was always 3 steps ahead of my failing mind, but I was already standing at the finish line, waiting patiently for her to arrive. I didn't raise my voice or confront her directly about what I had discovered. That would have completely ruined everything I was carefully planning in response to her betrayal. Instead, I started documenting her behavior quietly and precisely, like I was taking apart a broken clock to understand exactly how each piece functioned. I placed a tiny hidden camera inside the old kitchen clock that had belonged to my grandmother, another recording device behind the bookshelf in the sitting room where she liked to make her private phone calls. The living room lamp wasn't just providing light anymore, it was listening to every word she spoke when she thought I was sleeping. Each day, I continued playing the part of the grateful, dependent old man who needed her constant care and guidance. I smiled when she smiled, nodded when she explained things I already understood, and let her spoon-feed me lies along with my daily meals. But during the weekend, after she had gone home to her own apartment, I would review the footage and audio recordings she had unknowingly provided. I listened to her voice dripping with venom as she bragged to her friends about the foolish old man who was going to set her up financially for the rest of her life. I heard her laugh about my supposed mental decline and plan exactly how she would access my savings accounts once she gained legal control over my affairs. I rewrote my will completely, this time working with a lawyer I trusted who didn't even practice in our state. The new version left absolutely nothing to Talene, not a single dollar or personal possession. Everything I owned would go to the Caldervine Historical Trust, the one place my beloved wife had volunteered for years and truly cherished. I also recorded a detailed statement confirming my complete mental clarity, time-stamped and signed on camera, just in case she ever tried to claim I wasn't thinking clearly when I made these decisions. Talene continued believing I was too mentally confused to understand what was happening around me. She didn't realize that every gesture, every manipulation, every insult hidden behind her sweet voice was being carefully documented and preserved. The rope she thought she had wrapped around my heart was actually tightening around her own neck with each passing day. I proposed to her on a quiet Thursday evening, right after she brought me my nightly tea and kissed my forehead like I was her beloved pet project. Her eyes lit up immediately, but not with love or genuine happiness. Greed sparkled in those eyes like oil catching fire in a dark room. She said yes before I had even finished asking the question, already calculating how much closer this brought her to her ultimate goal. From that moment forward, she flaunted her new status like a championship trophy she had finally won. She told all the neighbors about our engagement, called me her sweet old man in front of delivery drivers and store clerks, and even started wearing my late wife's old robes around the house like she already owned everything inside it. I watched it all happen in complete silence, documenting every arrogant moment. I let her pick out expensive engagement rings, choose the wedding venue, and even tell the nurse at my medical clinic that she would be managing all my healthcare decisions from now on. She moved through my life like a queen claiming her new kingdom, and I let her believe she had won completely. She thought she was climbing a sturdy ladder toward her golden retirement dream. But I had built that ladder out of matchsticks, and she was holding the flame that would destroy it. Every smile she gave me, every false declaration of love, every time she played the devoted fiancé, she was actually tightening the trap I had carefully constructed around her schemes. On our wedding night, Talene was dressed in silk and perfume, pouring expensive wine and playing soft romantic music. She grinned like a fox who had finally trapped the helpless old hen after months of patient hunting. There were about 75 people at the wedding, Talene's family, her distant cousins, and her giggling friends in glittering dresses. A handful of my old friends and a few members from my church sat politely, many of them watching the ceremony with hesitant curiosity, unsure what to make of it all. The priest stood ready at the altar with his Bible, smiling and waiting for the cue. Talene looked radiant, practically glowing in the ivory dress she had so adamantly chosen. She laughed easily, waved to the guests, and kissed me on the cheek with the confidence of someone who believed she had already secured her prize. Just before the vows were to begin, I raised my hand, drawing the attention of the room. A wave of confusion passed over the guests. Talene turned to me, her expression slipping into panic as she asked, with a trembling voice, what was happening. I smiled back warmly and calmly slid a small envelope across her. When she asked what it contained, I simply told her it was her retirement package. She opened it eagerly, expecting perhaps insurance papers or bank account information. Instead, she found copies of legal documents, my true will that left her nothing, a notarized letter revoking all financial promises I had made, and my recorded statement confirming my complete mental clarity throughout our entire relationship. Her face drained of all color as reality started to dawn on her. She stammered about my supposed memory problems, claiming I couldn't even remember what I had eaten for breakfast most mornings. I kept calm and told her I remembered everything, including her phone conversation about enduring me for a payout. Then, I retrieved a small Bluetooth speaker from the inside pocket of my coat. With a single click, her voice began echoing across the hall. She had once boasted on a call that she was merely enduring me, claiming that in 6 months she would be set for life. The room fell into an instant, stunned silence. Gasps rose from her friends. One of her aunts dropped a glass in shock, and even the priest instinctively took a step back. My lawyer, seated in the front row, gave a small nod of confirmation, calm and prepared. Talene immediately cried out in protest, insisting the recording was fake, that I was simply old and confused. But I held her gaze without flinching and reminded her, with cold certainty, that the old man remembered everything. Then I let the next recording play. The stillness in the hall was louder than any outburst. Talene lunged forward, attempting to grab the speaker, but I stepped out of her reach. My lawyer rose to his feet and produced a folder, which contained copies of my will, up-to-date medical evaluations, and time-stamped still images taken from the hidden cameras. He calmly informed the room that everything had been documented. What began as shocked gasps quickly shifted into hushed murmurs. Her mother sat with a hand covering her mouth. One of Talene's friends quietly slipped out the back, whispering in disbelief. Talene's expression twisted, cycling from shock to rage, and finally into desperate pleading. She begged for understanding, claiming she had not meant what she said. But I didn't waver. I turned to the room, looked at everyone present, and declared the wedding over. And just like that, her carefully constructed fantasy unraveled. I didn't celebrate or gloat over her downfall. I simply felt restored to who I had always been underneath the grief and loneliness. Because true revenge isn't about shouting the loudest or causing the most dramatic scene. Looking back now, I realize I had become the very thing I thought I was fighting against. In my quest for justice, I had learned to deceive just as skillfully as she had. The monster I thought I was hunting had been living inside me all along. My story teaches us 4 important lessons. 1. Don't give trust. Let it be earned. Trust should never be handed over quickly just because someone says the right things. Watch their actions over time. Only through consistent, respectful behavior should someone be allowed into your personal life or emotional circle. Words are cheap, patterns are not. 2. Protect your financial decisions until you're absolutely sure. Before discussing or involving someone in your financial matters, especially newer relationships, take the time to fully understand their intentions. Rushing such conversations can expose you to manipulation. Your money and assets deserve caution, boundaries, and complete certainty before sharing. 3. Record red flags, even if they seem small at first. If someone shows behavior that makes you uncomfortable or raises concern, don't ignore it. Write it down, reflect on it, and track patterns. What feels small today could become a serious issue tomorrow. Documentation protects your memory and strengthens your position later. 4. Loneliness should never be an open door for deceit. Being alone doesn't mean you should accept just anyone's affection or attention. Manipulative people often prey on isolation. Guard your heart wisely. It's better to be alone and secure than accompanied by someone who quietly tears you down for their own gain. Comment what resonated most with you from this story. Like and subscribe if you want more content like this. Until next time, keep living with grace and purpose.